Subscribe to Storylab. Now, let's begin this one. Vincent Mahoney pressed his palm against the cold marble headstone, the morning dew seeping through his fingers. 3 years had passed since he'd buried an empty casket, since Christian Miles had called him at 2 a.m. with a voice cracking through manufactured grief, telling him his daughter Kirsten had died in a car crash on Highway 87. The closed casket funeral had been Christian's suggestion. The accident was too severe, he'd said, voice trembling with what Vincent now recognized as practiced emotion. Better to remember her as she was. Vincent was 52, lean and hard-edged from decades of military service and another decade as a psychological operations consultant. His steel-gray hair was cut military short, his blue eyes still sharp enough to catch the tremor in a liar's hands, the micro-expression that betrayed deception. Those skills had atrophied in grief. He'd failed to see what should have been obvious. The cemetery was empty except for the groundskeeper trimming hedges 3 rows over. Vincent stood, brushing grass from his jeans. He came here every Wednesday before work, a ritual that had replaced the Tuesday night dinners he'd shared with Kirsten before she'd married Christian Miles 2 months before her death. He remembered their last dinner together. Kirsten had seemed distracted, anxious. She'd ordered wine and barely touched it, kept checking her phone. "Dad," she'd started then stopped. "If something ever happened to me." "Nothing's going to happen to you, sweetheart. But if it did, promise me you'd look deeper. Promise me you wouldn't just accept what you're told." He'd laughed it off, attributed it to newlywed jitters. Christian Miles had seemed perfect on paper. Successful real estate developer, came from old money, treated Kirsten like a queen in public. Vincent had run a background check anyway, old habits from his military intelligence days. Nothing had surfaced, clean as fresh snow. The grocery store was Vincent's next stop, a mindless Wednesday routine. He was examining avocados when a man appeared beside him, 40-ish, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. Roman Daly, though Vincent didn't know the name yet. Vincent Mahoney? The man's voice was barely above a whisper. Vincent's hand instinctively moved toward where he used to carry his service weapon. Old reflexes. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know what happened to your daughter." Roman's eyes darted around the produce section. "And it wasn't a car crash." Vincent's blood ran cold. "What did you say?" Roman pressed a photograph into Vincent's hand, then a slip of paper. "Your daughter is alive. The Miles family, they're not who you think they are. That's not all they're hiding." His eyes held genuine fear. "That address on the back. Go there. Tonight. Alone. Don't tell anyone. They're watching you." Before Vincent could respond, Roman disappeared into the crowd near the deli counter. Vincent looked down at the photograph in his trembling hands and felt the world tilt on its axis. It was Kirsten, unmistakably his daughter, though she looked wrong, too thin, hair lank and unwashed, eyes hollow and distant. She was sitting in what looked like a basement room, staring at nothing. The photo was dated 2 weeks ago. Vincent stumbled to his car, hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the steering wheel. 3 years. 3 years of grief, of whiskey-soaked nights, of standing at an empty grave. 3 years of Christian Miles visiting him monthly, playing the devoted widower, still mourning his lost wife, bringing flowers and condolences and lies. At home, Vincent's hand steadied as training took over. Emotion was the enemy of clear thinking. He'd learned that in his 20 years as a military interrogator, refined it during his decade as a consultant teaching Fortune 500 executives how to detect deception and extract truth. He'd broken enemy combatants who'd been trained to resist, had taught CIA analysts how to read the subtle tells that separated lies from truth. And he'd missed it completely when it came to his own daughter. Vincent pulled out his old case files from the locked cabinet in his study. He'd kept them all. Every psychological profile, every interrogation transcript, every technique he'd developed for dismantling a person's mental defenses. He'd sworn he'd never use these methods on civilians. But the Miles family had forfeited any such protection when they took Kirsten. The address Roman had given him was in Millbrook, a wealthy suburb 40 minutes outside the city. Vincent had been there once, 3 years ago, to Christian's mother's birthday party. Diane Morrow, She'd kept her second husband's name after that marriage ended too. She'd been gracious and welcoming, had embraced Vincent like family. He remembered her summer home. A sprawling estate with manicured gardens and a wine cellar Christian had bragged cost more than most people's houses. The address wasn't the main estate. It was a property Vincent hadn't known existed. A smaller house on the back 40 acres of the Morrow property, accessible only by a private road. Vincent spent the afternoon preparing. He assembled a go bag, lock picks, a digital camera, a voice recorder, zip ties, his old service knife. He pulled up property records, satellite imagery, utility bills. The house showed minimal power usage, no water consumption pattern consistent with normal living. Someone was there, but living carefully, or being kept there. At 7 p.m., Vincent drove to Millbrook. He parked a half-mile from the property and approached on foot through the woods. His military training came back like muscle memory. How to move silently, how to use shadows, how to become invisible. The house was dark except for a single light in what looked like a basement window. Vincent circled the perimeter, noting security cameras, but they were old, poorly maintained, their fields of view predictable. This wasn't a prison. It was a hiding place. He picked the back door lock in 40 seconds. The house smelled of disuse and something chemical, cleaning supplies, or maybe medication. Vincent moved through the dark rooms, cataloging details. Expensive furniture covered in dust sheets. A kitchen with a refrigerator that hummed, but contained only basics: bread, milk, instant meals. Someone was being kept alive, but not comfortable. The basement door was locked from the outside with a deadbolt. Vincent's jaw clenched. He descended the stairs silently. The basement had been converted into a living space. Bed, small bathroom, a television mounted high on the wall playing muted infomercials. And there, on the bed, was Kirsten. She looked so much like the photo, and so much worse. His vibrant, sharp-minded daughter, who'd graduated top of her class from Columbia, who'd worked as an investigative journalist before meeting Christian, now lay curled on the bed like a broken doll. Her eyes were open but unfocused, lips moving soundlessly. Kirsten. Vincent's voice cracked. She didn't react. He moved closer, knelt beside the bed. There were pill bottles on the nightstand, benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, sedatives. They'd been keeping her drugged for 3 years. Baby girl, it's Dad. I'm here. Kirsten's eyes slowly found his face. For a moment, there was nothing, then something flickered in their depths. Recognition. Her lips formed a word, barely audible. Dad? I'm getting you out of here. Can't. Her words were slurred, heavy. They'll know. They're always watching. They said if I try to leave, they'd kill you. So they'd make it look like suicide. I couldn't let them. Vincent's heart shattered and reformed into something harder, colder. How long have you been down here? Since the accident. Wasn't an accident. I found out. Christian and his family, they run a network. Blackmail. Rich people. They stage situations, record them, then extort. I was investigating them for a story. Thought Christian didn't know. But he did. His mother, Diane, she's the head of it all. They couldn't kill me because I'd built a dead man switch. Files would release if I didn't check in weekly. After the fake accident, they kept me alive in case they needed to access my accounts, my contacts. Vincent's mind raced. This was worse and better than he'd imagined. Worse because of what they'd done to his daughter. Better because it gave him leverage. The drugs. Keep me compliant. Easier than restraints. Kirsten's hand found his, her grip weak. Dad, you have to go. If they find you here, they won't. Vincent pulled out his phone, photographed everything. The room, the pill bottles, Kirsten's condition. Evidence. I'm going to destroy them, sweetheart. Every single one of them. But I need you to hold on a little longer. Can you do that? Tears streamed down Kirsten's face. I tried to warn you. That last dinner. I know. I should have listened. That's on me. But I'm listening now. Vincent kissed her forehead. I'm going to fix this. And when I'm done, the Miles family will wish they'd never heard our name. He gave her his phone number written on a slip of paper, showed her how to hide it. Then he left the way he came, taking samples of the medications, photographing the security system, memorizing every detail of her prison. By the time Vincent reached his car, the grieving father had been replaced by something the Miles family couldn't begin to understand. They'd taken his daughter and turned her into a ghost. Now he would teach them what it meant to be haunted. Vincent didn't sleep that night. In his study, he assembled everything he knew about the Miles family on a corkboard, red string connecting the pieces. Christian Miles, 34, real estate developer, but the properties were mostly shells, fronts for the real business. Diane Morrow, 61, socialite and philanthropist, served on the boards of 3 charities. The perfect cover for someone who made their real money destroying lives. Then there was Diane's brother, Victor Strickland, who ran a private security firm. That's how they staged their scenarios. And Christian's younger sister, Celeste Miles, who worked in IT and probably handled the technical side, hacking, surveillance, data management. Roman Daly had reached out again through an encrypted email. Vincent had found the message waiting when he returned home. Roman identified himself as a former employee of Victor's security firm who discovered what they were really doing and tried to leave. They'd threatened his family, forced him to stay quiet. But he'd been watching Vincent, waiting for the right moment. "They've been monitoring you since Kirsten's death," Roman wrote. "Tapping your phones, reading your emails, following you. They needed to make sure you believe the story. I can help you, but we need to be careful. They have resources you can't imagine. Police, judges, politicians, they own people everywhere." Vincent drafted a response, "Tell me everything. Names, locations, how their operation works. And I'll need you to do something for me." The response came within minutes. Roman was desperate for a way out, willing to help bring down the organization that had him trapped. Over the next week, they communicated through encrypted channels, dead drops, and brief meetings in crowded public places. The picture Roman painted was staggering. The Miles family had been running their blackmail operation for 15 years, starting small, with local businessmen and growing into a sophisticated network targeting wealthy individuals across 3 states. They'd identify targets, research their weaknesses, then stage elaborate scenarios, fake affairs, planted evidence, fabricated crimes. Once they had compromising footage or evidence, they'd extort their victims for years. They'd accumulated over $40 million in untraceable cryptocurrency and offshore accounts. But more valuable than the money was the power. They had judges in their pocket, police chiefs, state legislators, people who'd paid the blackmail and then been blackmailed again with evidence of the payment itself. Kirsten had stumbled onto it while investigating a separate story about corruption in real estate development. She'd traced shell companies back to Christian, dug deeper, and discovered the whole operation. By the time she realized Christian was involved, she'd already married him. She'd built her dead man's switch, files uploaded to multiple servers, set to release if she didn't input a code weekly. But the Miles family had found a way around it. They'd forced her to give them the codes, then changed the system so she still believed she was protecting the files. Her insurance policy had been nullified before they staged her death. Vincent absorbed every detail, his mind already working 3 steps ahead. The Miles family had made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated what a father would do for his daughter. They'd assumed grief would make him weak, pliable, easy to monitor and control. They'd never interrogated someone like Vincent Mahoney. They didn't know what he was capable of. On the 8th day after the grocery store encounter, Vincent made his first move. He showed up at Christian Miles's office unannounced, playing the grieving father-in-law who just needed to talk. Christian's assistant tried to stop him, but Vincent's disarming smile and mention of remembering Kirsten got him through the door. Christian's office was all glass and steel, with a view of the city skyline. The man himself looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Tailored suit, perfect hair, practiced sympathy in his eyes when he saw Vincent. "Vincent, this is unexpected." Christian stood, extending his hand. "Is everything all right?" Vincent shook it, reading the micro-expressions. Christian was surprised, but not alarmed. "Good. I know this is probably strange, me showing up like this. But I've been thinking a lot about Kirsten lately. More than usual. And I realize there's so much about her last few weeks, I don't know. I thought maybe talking to you might help." Christian's face arranged itself into understanding concern. "Of course. Please sit. Can I get you coffee?" "No, thank you. Vincent sat, letting his posture slump slightly, playing the broken man. I keep wondering if there was something I missed. Some sign she was struggling. Maybe the accident. It happened so fast. These things always do. Christian leaned back in his chair, settling into what he probably thought was a comforting narrative. Kirsten was tired that night. I should have insisted she wait until morning to drive back from visiting her friend. But she was determined. You know how she could be. There had been no friend, no drive, just lies stacked on lies. Vincent nodded slowly. What friend was she visiting? I don't remember you mentioning that before. A flicker of something crossed Christian's face. Calculation, adjustment. Ashley. Ashley Kane. They've been friends since college. Kirsten hadn't seen her in years, and Ashley was only in town for the night. Vincent filed the name away. It would be easy enough to verify if this Ashley existed, if she'd been anywhere near the city that night. I see. And you and Kirsten. Things were good between you. We were very happy. Christian's voice was smooth, practiced. Planning to start a family. Actually, we just started trying when. He let the sentence trail off, bowing his head in false grief. Vincent wanted to leap across the desk and wrap his hands around Christian's throat. Instead, he pulled out his phone. I've been going through old photos. Found this one I'd forgotten about. He showed Christian a picture. Kirsten and Vincent at her college graduation, both smiling, her arm around his shoulders. Christian smiled sadly. She looked so happy. That was before she met you. Vincent let the words hang in the air, watching Christian's smile falter. Before she got caught up in your world. I'm not sure what you mean. Of course you don't. Vincent stood, buttoning his jacket. Thank you for your time, Christian. This talk has been illuminating. He left before Christian could respond, knowing he'd planted the first seed of doubt. Christian would wonder what Vincent knew, would report to his family, would make them all just a little bit nervous. Over the next 2 weeks, Vincent conducted a careful campaign of psychological pressure. He showed up at Diane Morrow's charity luncheon and made cryptic comments about truth coming to light. He bumped into Victor Strickland at a restaurant and mentioned he'd been doing some research into private security firms. He sent Celeste Miles an email about computer forensics, ostensibly asking for professional advice. Each interaction was carefully calibrated to create paranoia without revealing his hand. The Miles family would start to fracture under the uncertainty, would begin to question whether their secret was as secure as they thought. Meanwhile, Roman provided Vincent with names of victims, people the Miles family had blackmailed. Vincent reached out to them carefully, anonymously, planting seeds. What if the evidence they have on you could be discredited? What if there was a way to fight back? Most were too scared to respond, but a few began to reach back. A state senator who'd been caught in a staged affair. A tech CEO who'd been framed for insider trading. A police captain who'd been blackmailed over falsified evidence. Each of them had reason to want the Miles family destroyed, and each of them had resources Vincent could use. He was building an army, piece by piece, and the Miles family had no idea the walls were closing in. By the end of the 3rd week, Vincent had 15 people ready to testify against the Miles family if given immunity and protection. He had copies of files Roman had smuggled out of Victor's security firm. He had financial records showing suspicious payments. And he had a plan. But plans required patience, and every day that passed was another day Kirsten remained in that basement. Vincent visited her twice more, always careful, always watching for signs he'd been discovered. Each time he saw her, she was a little more alert. He'd convinced Roman to slowly reduce the dosage of her medications, just enough that she could think more clearly without the change being obvious. How much longer? She asked during his 3rd visit. Soon. I need everything in place. The Miles family has too much power to take down directly. I have to make them destroy themselves. Ow! Vincent smiled grimly. The same way I used to break enemy combatants. I'm going to make them doubt each other, question their own perceptions, turn on each other. Psychological operations. It's what I do best. Dad. Kirsten grabbed his hand with more strength than she'd had in their previous meetings. When this is over, when I'm really free, I want to watch them fall. You will, sweetheart. I promise you that. The next phase of Vincent's plan required a delicate touch. He needed to create evidence that one member of the Miles family was betraying the others. He chose Celeste, Christian's younger sister, as his target. She was the most isolated, the most vulnerable to doubt. Roman helped Vincent fabricate a trail. Fake emails suggesting Celeste was in contact with the FBI, encrypted messages indicating she was planning to turn state's witness, financial transfers that looked like she was moving money into hidden accounts. Then Vincent made sure Christian found those emails. The reaction was immediate. Vincent watched from a distance as Christian confronted Celeste at a family dinner, the argument spilling into the parking lot. Diane and Victor were called in. The family that had worked together for 15 years suddenly had a crack in their foundation. Celeste protested her innocence, but Vincent had made the evidence too compelling. In an organization built on deception, trust was always fragile. Within days, the Miles family was fracturing. Victor began monitoring Celeste's communications. Christian started hiding aspects of his operations from his sister. Diane, the matriarch, grew paranoid and controlling, demanding reports and proof of loyalty. Vincent watched it all unfold with cold satisfaction. He'd seen this pattern dozens of times in interrogation cells. How quickly certainty could become doubt, how suspicion could poison even the strongest bonds. But the Miles family was more dangerous than Vincent had anticipated. Victor Strickland wasn't just a security expert. He was a former intelligence operative who recognized psychological warfare when he saw it. 3 weeks into Vincent's campaign, Roman sent an urgent message. They know something's wrong. Victor's investigating. We need to move faster. Vincent was ready. He'd been preparing for this contingency, knowing that eventually the Miles family would realize they were under attack. It was time to move from psychological pressure to direct action. He arranged a meeting with his coalition of victims, the 15 people who were ready to testify. They met in a secure location, a conference room in a hotel under a fake name. Vincent laid out his plan. The Miles family has controlled you through fear, he told them, through the threat of exposure. But what if we take that power away? What if we expose everything at once, make the evidence they hold worthless? The state senator, James Decker, leaned forward. You want us to go public? Admit what we did. Some of you, yes. Others, we proved the evidence was fabricated, and I have proof of how they staged these scenarios. We do it all at once, a coordinated release through media outlets they don't control. We bury them in truth before they can spin the narrative. It was risky. Some of the victims would face consequences. But Vincent had found journalists willing to tell the story, had proof of the Miles family's methods, had victims willing to explain how they'd been targeted and manipulated. I'm in, said the tech CEO, Aaron Cummings. They've controlled my life for 6 years. I'm done hiding. One by one, the others agreed. Vincent had given them something more powerful than fear. Hope. The attack was scheduled for exactly 1 month after Roman had first approached Vincent in the grocery store. It would be a coordinated strike, media releases, police reports filed simultaneously in multiple jurisdictions, victims going public, evidence released to authorities. But 2 days before execution, everything changed. Roman was found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide. The message was clear. The Miles family knew he was the leak, and they were tying up loose ends. Vincent received an email that evening from an unknown address. It contained a single photograph, Kirsten in her basement room, and Christian Miles standing beside her with a knife in his hand. The message read, "Back off, or she dies for real this time." For the first time in a month, Vincent felt the cold grip of fear. They knew. Somehow, despite all his precautions, the Miles family knew he'd found Kirsten, which meant they also knew everything else, his coalition, his plan, his entire operation. Vincent looked at the photograph again, studying every detail with the trained eye of an intelligence analyst. Then he saw it, the timestamp on the basement security camera feed. The photo was 3 hours old, which meant Kirsten was already gone. They'd moved her. Vincent's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. Mr. Mahoney. It was Diane Morrow's cultured voice, dripping with false sympathy. I believe we need to talk. Come to the estate. Alone. Tonight at midnight. Or you'll never see Kirsten alive again. And before you think about bringing authorities, we have judges, police chiefs, district attorneys. You come alone, or she dies. You try anything clever, she dies. This ends tonight, one way or another. The line went dead. Vincent sat in the darkness of his study, the photo of Christian and Kirsten still glowing on his screen. The Miles family thought they'd backed him into a corner, thought they'd won. They'd killed Roman, taken Kirsten, and were offering Vincent a choice: walk into their trap or lose his daughter forever. They'd made their final mistake. They'd invited Vincent Mahoney to come to them. He smiled grimly and began to prepare. This wouldn't end the way the Miles family expected. Vincent had spent 2 decades learning how to turn traps into weapons, how to use an enemy's confidence against them. The Miles family wanted a confrontation. Vincent would give them one they'd never forget. Vincent arrived at the Morrow estate at 11:45 p.m. The sprawling property was lit up like a perverse celebration. Every window glowing, the gardens illuminated by strategic lighting that eliminated shadows. They wanted him to feel exposed, vulnerable. He parked his car at the front entrance as instructed. The door opened before he could knock. Victor Strickland stood there, 6 feet 2 inches of muscled menace in a black tactical outfit. He wasn't hiding what he was anymore. Arms up, Victor patted him down thoroughly, found the knife Vincent had deliberately left in his jacket pocket. Sloppy, Mahoney. Expected better from a military man. Vincent said nothing, letting Victor believe he'd successfully disarmed him. The real weapons were already in place, had been for 3 days. When Victor had been busy investigating Celeste and tracking Roman, Vincent had been preparing the battlefield. Diane Morrow waited in the main living room, seated like a queen on a white leather sofa. Christian stood beside her, and Celeste lurked near the doorway, laptop in hand. The whole family, ready for their moment of triumph. Where's Kirsten? Vincent's voice was level, controlled. Safe for now. Diane gestured to the sofa across from her. Please sit, Vincent. We have much to discuss. I'll stand. As you wish. Diane's smile was cold, practiced. You've been quite the pest these past few weeks. I'll admit, you're more resourceful than we anticipated. Finding Roman, building your little coalition of victims, creating all that evidence. Very impressive. You killed Roman. Victor handled that. She waved dismissively. The man was a liability. He should have stayed loyal. Like Kirsten should have. Vincent let anger creep into his voice. They expected it, needed to believe he was emotional and therefore compromised. Your daughter made her choice when she started investigating us. Christian spoke for the first time. She could have walked away. Instead, she dug deeper. So you faked her death and imprisoned her for 3 years. We did what was necessary, Diane said. Kirsten built security measures we needed to dismantle carefully. It took time to access everything, to ensure nothing she'd hidden would surface. And we needed her alive in case we required her cooperation. Insurance, you might say. Vincent's jaw clenched. And now we've reached an impasse. Diane leaned forward, her expensive perfume cutting through the air. You know our secrets. You've gathered evidence, testimonies, built a case. But we have your daughter, and we have something else. Leverage over every person in your coalition. Did you really think the state senator would betify against us when we have video of him with an underage girl? Fabricated, yes, but impossible to disprove. The CEO? We have evidence linking him to actual insider trading that has nothing to do with us. Each of your witnesses has a fail-safe insurance we can trigger if they speak. You're bluffing. Am I? Celeste turned her laptop around, showing a screen full of files. Every person you recruited, every piece of leverage we have. We've been 3 steps ahead of you the entire time. Vincent felt the walls closing in. They'd anticipated everything. Of course they had. This was what they did, what they built an empire on. Anticipating moves, creating leverage, controlling the narrative. So what do you want? Vincent asked. Simple. Diane stood, smoothing her designer dress. You walk away. Forget everything you know. Destroy your evidence. Convince your witnesses to stay silent. In return, we'll keep Kirsten alive. Comfortable even. We'll reduce her medications, give her better accommodations. She'll live, and you'll get occasional proof she's well. Fight us, and she dies. It's really that straightforward. You expect me to just abandon my daughter? We expect you to be realistic. Victor moved closer, hand resting on the weapon at his hip. You're good, Mahoney, but you're one man. We're an organization with unlimited resources and protection at every level. You can't win this. The best you can do is keep Kirsten alive. Vincent let silence stretch, appearing to consider their offer. Finally, he spoke. I want to see her. Proof she's actually alive right now. Not some old photo or video. I see Kirsten, verify she's unharmed, then we talk. Diane exchanged glances with Victor and Christian. She nodded. Victor, bring her up. Victor left the room. Vincent counted seconds, noting positions, exits, angles. Christian stood 6 feet away, armed with what looked like a Glock and a shoulder holster under his blazer. Celeste was still by the doorway, not armed but blocking the most direct exit. Diane was unarmed but dangerous in other ways. Her phone was on the coffee table, likely speed dial access to compromised authorities. 5 minutes later, Victor returned with Kirsten. Vincent's heart contracted. She could barely walk, leaning heavily on Victor, her eyes unfocused from whatever they'd given her. But she was alive, breathing, real. Dad, she murmured, recognition fighting through the pharmaceutical haze. I'm here, baby girl. Vincent took a step toward her, but Victor's hand tightened on her arm. That's close enough, Victor growled. You've seen her. She's alive. Now, your decision. Vincent looked at his daughter, at the family that had stolen 3 years of her life, at the trap they'd laid so carefully. He thought about the coalition he'd built, the evidence he'd gathered, the plan that was falling apart. Then he smiled. You know what I did in the military? Vincent's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. I was a psychological operations specialist. My job was to break enemy combatants, extract information, turn assets. I got very good at it. One of the things I learned was that the best interrogators don't use physical torture. They use environment, psychology, control of information. Fascinating, Diane said drily, but irrelevant. Is it? Vincent's smile widened. See, you've been so focused on your leverage, your control, your protection. You never stopped to wonder why I came here alone tonight. Why I let myself be captured so easily. Why I brought a knife you could easily find. Christian's hand moved toward his weapon. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that for the last 3 days, while Victor was investigating Celeste and tracking down Roman, I was here, in your estate. Not the main house. You have too much security. But the grounds. The wine cellar specifically. Did you know there's an entrance to it from outside, hidden behind the garden shed? Your security system doesn't even monitor it. Diane's face paled. You're lying. Am I? Vincent pulled out his phone. They'd searched him for weapons, but not for technology. Another miscalculation. He pulled up a photo and showed it to them. Recognize this? It's your wine collection. Vintage Bordeaux, rare Burgundies, bottles worth thousands of dollars each. And see those small devices attached to some of the bottles? Those are incendiary charges, not bombs. I'm not trying to kill anyone. Just destroy your most precious possessions. They're on a dead man's switch, triggered if I don't input a code every hour. Miss that window, and your entire collection goes up in flames. Christian lunged forward, but Victor caught his arm. Diane stared at Vincent with newfound wariness. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? You took my daughter. You think I care about wine? Vincent's voice hardened. But that's not all. While I was in your cellar, I found something interesting. A safe, built into the floor, hidden under a false panel. Want to guess what's in it? The color drained from Diane's face completely. Victor's expression turned murderous. Whatever was in that safe, it was important. You didn't, Victor said. I did. Copied everything. Hard drives, documents, files dating back 15 years. Every victim, every piece of blackmail material, every financial record. The real files, not the scrubbed versions you show each other. Including some very interesting documents about your offshore accounts and certain activities that would interest not just local authorities, but the FBI, federal jurisdiction, which means your local judges and police can't protect you. You're bluffing, Christian said, but his voice shook. Call my bluff then. Keep Kirsten. Trigger your leverage against my witnesses. See what happens when copies of everything in your safe get delivered to 6 different FBI field offices, 3 major newspapers, and a dozen federal prosecutors simultaneously. By people you don't know, using channels you can't trace. Vincent took a step forward. Victor raised his weapon, but Vincent ignored him, focused entirely on Diane. You built your empire on information and leverage. Congratulations. So did I. The difference is, I don't care about exposure. I don't care about consequences. I care about my daughter. So here's my offer, and it's the only one you'll get. Release Kirsten to me. Tonight. Unharmed. In return, I'll give you 48 hours to disappear before I release everything. Take your money, run to whatever non-extradition country you've been planning as an escape route, and you get to live. Stay, and you go to prison. Fight me, hurt Kirsten, and I'll make sure every inmate in whatever federal facility you end up in knows exactly what you did. Child endangerment, blackmail, kidnapping. You'll be the most hated people in the system. The room was silent, except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. Diane's calculated mind was clearly racing through options, scenarios, percentages. We could kill you right now, Victor said. Kirsten too. Claim self-defense. Make your evidence disappear. You could try, Vincent agreed. But I've been sending status updates every 15 minutes to a network you don't have access to. People who don't appear in any of your files, who you've never surveilled. Miss even one update, and everything releases immediately. Kill me, and you guarantee your own destruction. It's called a dead man's switch, Diane. I believe you're familiar with the concept. Kirsten used one too, remember? Only difference is mine actually works. Diane stood, walked to the window, stared out at her manicured gardens. When she turned back, her face was a mask of cold fury. You've ruined everything. 15 years of work. You ruined the moment you touched my daughter. This is just the consequences catching up. Victor, let her go, Diane said quietly. Mother, Christian protested. Let her go. Diane's voice cracked like a whip. It's over. He's won. Victor released Kirsten. She stumbled, and Vincent caught her, supporting her weight. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face. 48 hours, Vincent said. Use them wisely. He walked toward the door, Kirsten leaning heavily against him. Christian moved to block their path, but Diane's sharp Christian stopped him. At the door, Vincent paused. One more thing. Roman Daly had a wife and 2 kids. Anonymous donation to cover their expenses should appear in their account by morning. If it doesn't, the 48 hours becomes 24. He didn't wait for a response. Vincent carried Kirsten to his car, settled her in the passenger seat, and drove away from the Morrow estate. In his rearview mirror, he watched the lights of the mansion fade. Only when they were miles away did Kirsten speak, her voice clearer than it had been in that room. Did you really plant charges in the wine cellar? Vincent smiled grimly. No, but I did copy everything in their safe 3 days ago, and I do have a dead man's switch ready to send it all to authorities. The charges were a bluff to make them believe I'd act irrationally, emotionally. People believe what fits their narrative of you. Kirsten laughed, a sound that turned into a sob. You learned that in the military? 20 years of breaking people who thought they were unbreakable. The Miles family's mistake was thinking money and connections made them untouchable. But everyone breaks eventually. You just have to find the right pressure point. What happens in 48 hours? They run, or I destroy them. Either way, you're free. Kirsten was silent for a moment. I want to be there when they fall. I've earned that. Vincent reached over, squeezed her hand. You'll get your justice, sweetheart. I promise. The Miles family didn't run. Vincent had known they wouldn't. People like Diane Morrow didn't run. They believed too firmly in their own invincibility, their protections, their power. They would fight, try to salvage something, attempt to eliminate Vincent before he could make good on his threats. It was exactly what he'd counted on. Vincent had taken Kirsten to a private medical facility run by Dr. Franklin Haskins, a former military physician who specialized in treating victims of chemical dependency and psychological trauma. Dr. Haskins asked no questions, simply examined Kirsten, ran blood tests, and began the careful process of weaning her off the medications that had kept her docile for 3 years. She's going to have a rough few weeks, Dr. Haskins told Vincent on the second day. Withdrawal, psychological impact of prolonged captivity, trauma processing. But she's strong. She'll recover. Vincent sat beside Kirsten's bed in the private room, watching her sleep naturally for the first time since he'd found her. The 48 hours he'd given the Miles family had been a tactical choice. Time enough for them to make mistakes, not enough for them to mount an effective counterstrike. He'd spent those hours assembling his final offensive. The coalition of victims he'd recruited received new instructions through encrypted channels. The evidence from the Miles safe had been copied, cataloged, and distributed to trusted individuals with instructions to release it on Vincent's signal. But Vincent had one more chess piece to play, one the Miles family didn't know existed. Judge Matthew Daly had been on the Miles family payroll for 8 years, presiding over cases that affected their interests, dismissing charges, granting favorable rulings. Vincent had identified him during his investigation and reached out with a simple proposal. Flip, testify against the Miles family with immunity, or go down with them. Daly had wrestled with the choice for a week before deciding that a ruined career was better than a prison sentence. He'd agreed to wear a wire, to document every communication with the Miles family, to build a federal case from the inside. On the morning of the 48th hour, Daly received a call from Diane Morrow. She wanted emergency injunctions against Vincent, wanted charges filed for breaking and entering, wanted him arrested and silenced before he could release his evidence. Daly recorded every word. "I need this done today, Matthew." Diane's voice was sharp on the recording. "Use whatever charges you can fabricate. Plant evidence if you need to. I don't care about the legality. We'll fix it later. Just get him off the board." "That's asking me to break the law, Mrs. Morrow," Daly said carefully, following the script Vincent had provided. "You've broken it for us dozens of times before. What one more? The other times, there was plausible deniability. This is direct obstruction, and I'm paying you $200,000 to handle it." Diane's composure cracked. "Do I need to remind you what we have on you? The bribes, the fixed cases, I'm aware of the leverage you think you have," Daly interrupted. "But I'm also aware that Vincent Mahoney has copies of everything in your safe, which means he knows about all of it anyway. So your threats are empty, Mrs. Morrow." Silence on the line. "Then, you're turning on us. I'm saving myself. You should have run when you had the chance." Daly ended the call. The recording was time-stamped, documented, admissible. It was the final piece Vincent needed. At exactly 48 hours after leaving the Morrow estate, Vincent triggered the release. Files went to FBI field offices in 3 states. Evidence packages arrived at the U.S. Attorney's offices. Major newspapers received comprehensive documentation of the Miles family's operations, complete with victim testimonies and corroborating evidence. By noon, FBI agents were executing search warrants at the Morrow estate, Victor Strickland's security firm, and Christian Miles's real estate offices. By 3 p.m., federal marshals had arrested Diane, Victor, Christian, and Celeste on charges ranging from extortion and blackmail to kidnapping, money laundering, and conspiracy. Vincent watched the news coverage from Kirsten's hospital room. She was awake now, still groggy from the medication changes, but alert enough to understand what was happening. "They're saying it's one of the largest organized blackmail operations ever uncovered," the newscaster reported. "Federal prosecutors are calling it the Morrow Conspiracy, named after matriarch Diane Morrow, who allegedly ran the operation for over 15 years. Sources say they have extensive documentation of victims, including prominent business people and politicians." More at 11. Kirsten's hand found Vincent's. "It's really over? The arrests are just the beginning. The trial will take months. But yes, sweetheart, you're free. They can't hurt you anymore. What about their leverage? The compromised judges and police. Most of them will flip to save themselves now that the operation is exposed. The ones who don't, the FBI will handle. Federal jurisdiction means local corruption can't protect them." Vincent smiled. "And I have insurance. Copies of everything distributed to people who'll release them if anything happens to us. Real dead man's switches this time." Kirsten closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. "Thank you, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier, before I married Christian. I thought I could handle it alone. You tried to warn me at that last dinner. I should have listened. Vincent squeezed her hand. But we're here now. That's what matters. Over the next week, the full scope of the Miles family's operation became public. 43 victims came forward. Federal prosecutors found evidence of over 200 instances of blackmail and extortion. The cryptocurrency accounts were traced and frozen. Over $52 million in assets. Christian Miles tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against his mother and uncle in exchange for a reduced sentence. Diane, ever the matriarch, refused to cooperate with authorities. Victor Strickland maintained silence, letting his lawyers do the talking. Celeste broke first, her isolation and paranoia from Vincent's psychological campaign, making her the weakest link. She confirmed everything, provided passwords and encryption keys, gave prosecutors the ammunition they needed to build an airtight case. Vincent attended the bail hearing with Kirsten. She was stronger now, 3 weeks off the heavy medications, working with trauma therapists daily. She'd insisted on being there, on seeing the Miles family in chains. The judge, not Matthew Daly, who'd recused himself from all cases involving the Morrow conspiracy, denied bail for all 4 defendants. Flight risk, extensive financial resources, evidence of witness tampering. They would remain in federal custody until trial. Christian saw Vincent and Kirsten in the courtroom gallery, his face contorted with rage and shame. He tried to speak, but the marshals silenced him, led him away in shackles. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Vincent had prepared a statement, brief and precise. My daughter was kidnapped, drugged, and held prisoner for 3 years by people who thought they were above the law. Today, justice began. To anyone else who's been victimized by the Miles family, your courage in coming forward has made this possible. Thank you. He refused to answer questions, just guided Kirsten to their car and drove away. The trial began 4 months later. Vincent had prepared extensively, working with prosecutors to present the evidence in the most damaging sequence. He'd studied the jury, assessed their psychological profiles, advised on which witnesses would be most effective. But he didn't testify himself. This wasn't his story to tell. It was Kirsten's. She took the stand on the 3rd day of the trial, wearing a conservative blue suit, her hair pulled back. She'd gained weight, looked healthy for the first time in years. But the real change was in her eyes, clear, sharp, angry. The prosecutor, a veteran federal attorney named Guillermo Knight, led her through the testimony carefully. Miss Mahoney, can you tell the jury how you first learned about the Miles family's blackmail operation? Kirsten's voice was steady, controlled. I was investigating real estate corruption for a story. I noticed unusual patterns in property transfers, shell companies that didn't make business sense. When I traced the ownership, they led back to Christian Miles. At that point, we were dating. I thought he might be involved in something questionable, but I didn't know the full scope. What did you do? I kept investigating. Quietly. I accessed Christian's home computer when he was away on business, found encrypted files. It took me 3 weeks to break the encryption, but when I did, Kirsten paused, emotion cracking her composure. I found everything. Videos of staged scenarios, blackmail demands, financial records. Hundreds of victims. And Christian was in the middle of it, along with his mother, uncle, and sister. What was your reaction? Terror. By then, we were engaged. I realized I'd gotten too close, that they might already know I was investigating. So I built insurance, a dead man switch that would release all my findings if anything happened to me. I told Christian I knew about the operation, that I had protections in place. And how did Christian respond? Kirsten looked directly at Christian Miles, sitting at the defense table. He proposed immediately, told me we should get married right away, make it official. I was so stupid. I thought love would protect me, that marriage would complicate things enough they'd leave me alone. I didn't realize they were planning everything. She described the weeks after the wedding. How Christian had slowly isolated her from friends and family. How Diane had convinced her to consolidate her accounts, making them easier to access. How Victor had suggested she switch to a new computer system that he provided, already compromised with spyware. They were dismantling my defenses piece by piece. And then one night, Christian told me we were going for a drive. Said he wanted to show me a property he was developing. Instead, he drove me to that house in Millbrook, the one where they kept me. Victor was waiting, and Diane. Kirsten's voice hardened. They told me they found my dead man's switch, bypassed it. They'd accessed all my files, deleted my backups. I had nothing. And then Christian asked me to give him my wedding ring because he was going to need it to identify my body after my accident. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors were crying. They staged a car crash, made it look like I died. And then they locked me in that basement and started the drugs. At first I fought, but after weeks of sedatives, antipsychotics, benzos, I stopped fighting. I stopped being me. They destroyed Kirsten Mahoney as effectively as if they'd killed her. How did you survive for 3 years? I didn't. Not really. The person in that basement wasn't me. It was something hollow, broken. I only came back when my father found me. Kirsten looked at Vincent in the gallery. He never gave up. Even when everyone else believed I was dead, he kept looking. The defense attorneys tried to shake her testimony on cross-examination, suggesting she'd been complicit in Christian's business, that she'd had mental health issues before the marriage. But Kirsten had spent weeks preparing, had worked with prosecutors to anticipate every attack. She remained calm, factual, devastating. By the time she stepped down, 3 jurors were openly weeping, and the defense looked shaken. Over the next 3 weeks, prosecutors paraded witnesses. Former victims described how they'd been targeted and blackmailed. Financial experts traced the money flows. FBI agents detailed the evidence found in the Morrow safe. Matthew Daly testified about years of corrupt rulings and instructions from Diane Morrow. The Miles family's defense was fragmented. Christian tried to blame his mother, claiming he'd been following her orders. Celeste pleaded mental duress and manipulation. Victor remained silent, betting on reasonable doubt. Diane took the stand in her own defense, but her polished composure couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence. Vincent attended every day of the trial, sitting behind Kirsten, lending silent support. He watched the jury carefully, reading their body language, their reactions. By the second week, he knew how it would end. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdicts with a steady voice. Guilty on all counts. All 4 defendants, every charge. Diane Morrow showed no emotion. Victor Strickland nodded as if he'd expected it. Celeste Miles collapsed, sobbing. Christian stared at Kirsten with something between hatred and disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend that the woman he'd imprisoned had destroyed him. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge, a stern woman named Taylor Hines, didn't mince words. The crimes committed by the defendants represent a systematic, prolonged exploitation of victims across multiple states. This wasn't impulsive criminal behavior. It was a calculated enterprise built on human suffering. The court must send a clear message that such actions will not be tolerated. Diane Morrow received 35 years in federal prison. Victor Strickland got 30 years. Celeste Miles, for her cooperation, received 20 years. Christian Miles, who'd held his wife prisoner and administered the drugs that kept her docile, received 40 years. None of them would be eligible for parole for at least 20 years. By the time they were released, if they lived that long, they would be elderly, broken, stripped of everything they'd built. Vincent watched Christian Miles being led away in chains. The man looked back one last time, meeting Vincent's eyes. Vincent held his gaze, letting Christian see exactly what he'd awakened. A father's wrath, cold and patient, and utterly without mercy. Then Christian was gone, swallowed by the federal prison system. Outside the courthouse, Kirsten gave a brief statement to the press. For 3 years, I was erased. My identity, my freedom, my life, all taken by people who believed they were above justice. Today, that justice was served. I want to thank the FBI, the prosecutors, and everyone who came forward as witnesses. Your courage made this possible. And to other victims of the Miles family operation, you are not forgotten. You are not alone. This verdict is for all of us. She paused, then added, and to my father, Vincent Mahoney, thank you for never giving up on me. for fighting when I couldn't fight for myself, for reminding me that family doesn't abandon family, no matter how dark things get. Vincent stood beside her, saying nothing. He'd done what any father would do, what any person should do when someone they love is taken. As they walked to the car, a reporter called out, "Mr. Mahoney, you were military intelligence. You used psychological operations against the Miles family. Do you have any regrets about your methods?" Vincent stopped to consider the question. "The Miles family kidnapped my daughter, drugged her for 3 years, and stole her life. They blackmailed hundreds of people, corrupted public officials, and operated with impunity for 15 years. My only regret is that I didn't find her sooner. Some people might say you manipulated the system, used illegal methods. Some people didn't have their daughter in a basement being force-fed sedatives." Vincent's voice was calm, but carried an edge that made the reporter step back. "I used the skills I learned serving my country to save my daughter and bring criminals to justice. If that makes me a manipulator, I can live with that." He got in the car and drove away, Kirsten beside him, both of them finally free. 6 months after the sentencing, Kirsten published her story. Not in a traditional newspaper. She'd started her own investigative journalism platform, focused on exposing corruption and organized crime. Her first major piece was a comprehensive account of the Miles family operation, how it worked, how it was discovered, how it was destroyed. The story went viral, won awards, led to legislative reforms around blackmail and victim protection. Kirsten became a sought-after expert on organized crime and psychological manipulation. She'd also started a foundation to help victims of long-term imprisonment and drugging, using her own experience to guide recovery programs. The foundation was funded partially by the seized assets of the Miles family operation, $52 million that had been forfeited to the federal government and then granted to victim services. Vincent attended the foundation's first fundraising gala, watching with pride as Kirsten spoke to a room full of donors and supporters. This was who she'd always been, fierce, committed, unwilling to back down from a fight. The Miles family had tried to erase that person, but they'd failed. After the gala, father and daughter sat on the patio of Vincent's house, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset. "I've been offered a book deal," Kirsten said. "They want me to write about the whole experience. The investigation, the imprisonment, the rescue, the trial. Are you going to do it?" "I think so. People need to know how these operations work, how predators function, how to protect themselves." She sipped her wine. "But I want to write it honestly, which means writing about the fear, the times I thought I'd never get out, the moments I wanted to give up." "You never gave up, sweetheart. You survived, because I knew you'd come. Even when they told me you believed I was dead, even when they showed me fake evidence of you moving on, I knew you'd figure it out eventually." Kirsten looked at her father. "You taught me that. Never trust easy answers. Always dig deeper. That's what saved me." Vincent thought about that last dinner before Kirsten's death, when she tried to warn him. He'd finally listened, just 3 years too late. "I should have protected you better. Should have seen the signs." "Dad, stop." Kirsten put her hand on his. "You can't protect me from everything. I'm an adult. I make my own choices. I chose to investigate the Miles family. I chose to marry Christian despite the red flags. Those are my decisions. And I chose to burn their world to the ground. That was mine." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn orange and purple. Somewhere in different federal prisons, the Miles family was settling into their new reality. Years of confinement, loss of power, the slow grind of prison time. Christian Miles would be 76 when he was eligible for parole. His mother would be 96. They'd lost everything: freedom, wealth, reputation, future. "Do you think they understand why they lost?" Kirsten asked. Vincent considered the question. "Diane probably does. She's smart enough to see her mistakes in retrospect. Victor knows but doesn't care. He's a soldier who followed orders and got caught. Celeste understands she was always expendable. But Christian..." Vincent shook his head. "Christian thought he was entitled to you, to your obedience, to your life. He'll die in prison, still not understanding that you were never his to control." "Good." Kirsten's voice was hard. "Let him die, confused and alone. He earned it. They finished their wine as stars began to appear. Tomorrow, Kirsten would return to her work, Vincent to his consulting. They'd both carry scars from the 3 years of separation, from the horrors Kirsten had endured. But they'd also carry something else, proof that family doesn't abandon family, that justice can prevail, that predators can be hunted and defeated. Vincent Mahoney had spent 20 years learning how to break people who thought they were unbreakable. The Miles family had given him the perfect opportunity to apply those skills in service of something that mattered more than any military objective. They'd taken his daughter. He'd taken everything. And in the end, the father who'd refused to believe easy answers had saved the daughter who'd refused to stop fighting. Justice, Vincent reflected, wasn't always clean or simple. But sometimes it was exactly what the situation demanded. The last light faded from the sky. Inside the house, Vincent's phone buzzed with a message from Matthew Daly, the judge who'd flipped and helped build the case. The message contained a single photo, Christian Miles in prison orange, looking diminished and defeated. Vincent showed it to Kirsten. She studied it for a long moment, then deleted the image. "I don't need to see him anymore," she said. "He's already gone." And he was. Christian Miles, Diane Morrow, Victor Strickland, Celeste Miles, all of them were ghosts now, locked away from the world they tried to control. Vincent Mahoney and his daughter had their lives back. That was the only victory that mattered. The rest was just the consequences of crossing the wrong father.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.